down. Could Sandra Goudie become a ghost mayor if you've got to be jabbed to get into council buildings? A man and his megaphone targeting Auckland's unvaccinated, one street at a time. COVID takes Christmas lunch off the table for a Dunedin charity. And a little less showdown and a bit more slowdown and get your papers in order as National's new leader takes on the PM. And an epic survival story. It's got everything. A shark, a penguin, a pushbike, a backpack and a bloke called Jerry.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Anyone travelling to Northland without a vaccine pass or negative COVID result may be asked to complete a rapid antigen test. 2 checkpoints into Northland are being set up for when Aucklanders are allowed out of the city next week, one near Urititi south of Whangarei and the other on State Highway 12 near Maunga Turoto. Police will be stopping vehicles and Topical border control teams will be checking for documentation. Border Control Regional Coordinator Ruben Taipari says anyone who doesn't have the right information may need to take a test.
We will do that on site. Obviously, there's going to be a delay. We don't want to be holding up everybody, so we're pulling them off. We've allocated some space on the side of the road there from the checkpoint itself for that process to happen. We've got proper medic staff on site to do all of that job.
Ruben Taipari says his teams are aware of the need to keep traffic moving and there is flexibility around the setup depending on how it goes. Te Pāti Māori co-leaders say they are two of the biggest thugs because of their involvement with iwi-led checkpoints. ACT leader David Seymour has said New Zealanders have a right to move around the country without being stopped by thugs. But Debbie Ngarewa-Packer says she's proud to be a thug if that's what protecting your community looks like.
Stand in front of you are two of the biggest thugs because I'm really proud of the iwi and I recognise the mahi that they're doing to protect not just Māori communities but all of our communities. So kia kaha whānau, keep doing your thugs to stuff.
David Seymour is defending his comments, saying he thinks people who block roads are thugs, not iwi specifically. Christopher Luxon has made his parliamentary debut as the new opposition leader, targeting the government's investment in intensive care. Mr Luxon faced off with the Prime Minister in the debating chamber for the first time this afternoon. He stumbled in one of his questions, but soon recovered.
Does she agree the failure to increase ICU beds during a pandemic is quite simply another illustration of her government's ongoing failure to deliver and to actually get things done?
Mr Speaker, my view of delivery is the lowest case numbers in the OECD, the lowest level of hospitalisation, the lowest death rate.
Jacinda Ardern says her focus is on keeping people out of ICU. The Mayor of Kapiti Coast believes the worst of the heavy rain is over. The Wellington region, and in particular Kapiti, has been hit by huge downpours over the last 2 days. The rainfall is heavier this afternoon after light showers this morning. But Mayor Kay Gurunathan says the rivers are receding.
The danger level, I think, is getting less and less, and so that's good. What we are going to see now is what damage it has done.
He says there's been some damage to houses in Waitangi and Paikakariki. Some Thames-Coromandel residents are horrified by their mayor's stubborn anti-vax stance and resulting code of conduct complaint. Sandra Goudie has rejected the Pfizer vaccine and says she's waiting for the Novavax jab, which is not yet available in New Zealand. Councillor Gary Gottlieb filed a complaint alleging the mayor spoke at an anti-vaccine meeting. The council leadership deemed this complaint internally resolved and dropped it. Roy Mata McGregor is among the locals who are shocked by the mayor's stance.
Unbelievably outrageous. They're going to have to change the legislation or the rules around what mayors can and can't get away with. She can't be setting any kind of example like that.
Sandra Goudie declined to speak to RNZ. The grandmother of a teenager who spent time in the Hawke's Bay Regional Prison Youth Unit is devastated it could be adapted for quarantine. Corrections is considering using the youth units in Christchurch and Hastings to house prisoners with COVID-19. One woman says her grandson's time in Hawke's Bay was enormously positive and he's now getting his life back on track. The Chief Custodial Corrections Officer, Neil Beals, says no final decisions have been made. It's 5:04. New Zealand Rugby has spoken to Black Ferns coach Glenn Moore regarding allegations he made disparaging comments to hooker Te Kura Ngāta Airinga Mate, but won't say whether he's denied them. In a social media post, Te Kura Ngāta Airinga Mate has revealed she suffered mental health issues on the side's recent Northern Hemisphere tour and that comments from Moa contributed to her situation. Ngāta Airinga Mate says she was told she didn't deserve to be in the team and was selected only to play the guitar. The NZR's Chris Lendrum says they're taking the allegations seriously.
He's obviously distressed and upset as well. So, we've got obviously some work ahead of us to explore this issue as part of the review. Glenn will be a part of that. It's obviously a tough time for him and his whānau as well, absorbing those comments.
Meanwhile, All Blacks loose forward Sam Cane has re-signed with New Zealand Rugby to the end of 2025. England say fast bowler James Anderson isn't injured but is simply being rested for the opening Ashes cricket test against Australia starting in Brisbane tomorrow. It had been reported that Anderson had a calf injury. All-rounder Ben Stokes is fit and available for selection after a lengthy injury layoff, and England are chasing their first Ashes series win in 10 years. Everton's risen above the relegation zone in football's English Premier League with a 2-1 home win over Arsenal. That's the news.
A turbulent council.
One of the reasons I got onto council was that she was the mayor that would not sign the climate change declaration. She is a science denier.
Tired teachers.
Online teaching and adjusting, as well as in behaviour issues among students needing additional support with their learning. That all combines to quite a lot of pressure.
And timeless techno.
Other cities have major industries that they're known for. The club culture and techno music is the signature of Berlin.
Terrific. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Cloudy periods, a few showers, some possibly heavy tomorrow afternoon and evening. For the remaining North Island areas, periods of rain, heavy at times, clearing from Manawatu southwards tonight or tomorrow morning. Rain elsewhere, easing to showers tomorrow morning, some heavy in the afternoon and evening with possible thunderstorms for Hawke's Bay. Marlborough and Nelson, partly cloudy with isolated showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Bulla and Westland, partly cloudy, isolated showers, clearing for Bulla this evening. For Canterbury, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, clearing tonight, partly cloudy for tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mostly fine. However, isolated showers are expected inland this evening, showers developing about the fjords tomorrow morning, and late rain for Stewart Island. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The gateway to Northland will be guarded by 2 checkpoints this summer to keep COVID out, but to welcome vaccinated visitors in. Police will be stopping cars south of Whangarei, near Uretiti, on State Highway 12, near Mangatoroto, from next Wednesday. Officers will be joined by Topical Border Control, who will be checking everyone has the right documents. The checkpoints have come under fire in recent days, but the government's defending them, labelling some criticism as plain racist. Nita Blake-Person reports.
The countdown's on to Auckland is pouring out of the city next Wednesday, and for the tens of thousands who head north over the coming weeks, they'll be met by a welcoming party.
Starting on midnight of the 15th of December, we will be processing all of the cars coming through from Auckland up into the north into the Topical.
Topical Border Control Regional Coordinator Ruben Taipare and his teams will be joining police at checkpoints on State Highway 1 at Uretiti and on State Highway 12 near Maungaturoto. Police will be stopping the vehicles and Taipare's teams will check for vaccine passes.
If everybody in your car has the proper vaccination passports and identifications that's already being pre-organised, you just show it to the person with the technology of scanning that is there, the interviewer. They will immediately go through it. Once it's all done, it's a matter of they have a sticker that they put on your car just to say that you've been through there. It's a great sticker saying thank you to everybody.
Northland still has the lowest vaccination rates in the country. For those who don't have a pass, things may take a little longer.
Anybody, though, who has difficulty in providing that information, we have swab testing we have other areas where we could pull off and have a bit more detailed conversation with.
Taipari says people who can't prove a negative result may be asked to complete a rapid antigen test, and there will be medics on hand for that. He says they're very wary of keeping things moving, and there is flexibility around the setup depending on how it goes.
So it's going to take a lot of work and fast learning. We're building the plane as we fly in it, so it's going to take a lot of time. We just hope that everybody understands.
The border doesn't include all of Northland, with the Kaipara district effectively in half. The checkpoints will run around the clock to start with police eventually shifting to random checkpoints and spot checks across the rohi. But police are refusing to say when the switch will happen, and they're adamant not all cars will be stopped, nor will traffic be held up unnecessarily. Officers are coming from across the country to help their Northland colleagues, with 74 staff running the show. National's new leader, Christopher Luxon, isn't happy about that.
Fundamentally, we're going to have a thin blue line that just got a lot thinner. And I can tell you, when you talk to the Police Association, you heard Mark Mitchell talk about it this morning, really there's got to be a better way than doing this, because it's disrupting a lot of people. It's unclear how it's going to work, how long the trip's going to take, how many checkpoints you're going to be going through, fundamentally what does it mean for tourism operators within that region, and I just think there's going to be some real challenges there, operational challenges.
Ex-leader David Seymour highly critical too.
I think people who block roads are thugs, but if you listen carefully, I haven't actually called iwi thugs. I've called people who block roads and threaten to disrupt other people's freedoms thugs, and that's what they are.
Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Ngāriwa-Paka taking the name-calling in her stride.
I'm actually really proud to be called a thug if that's what protecting your community looks like. So, standing in front of you are two of the biggest thugs, because I'm really proud of the iwi, and I recognise the mahi that they're doing to protect not just Māori communities, but all of our communities. So kia kaha whānau, keep doing your thugs to stuff.
But it's criticism Taitokoro MP Calvin Davis says is racist.
If it was a group of Rotarians or business leaders or farmers helping out the police, they'd be lauded as upstanding citizens, but because it's Māoris, they're labelled thugs, and I think that's wrong.
While police are refusing to say how long the checkpoints will run for, Taitokoro Border Control is adamant they'll be there for as long as needed to keep COVID out and their communities safe.
Picked only to play the guitar. A Black Ferns player says comments from her coach led to her mental breakdown during the side's recent Northern tour. Te Kura Ngata Arena Mate says the comments made over time gave her anxiety, caused her to hyperventilate, and says the sport she loves has made her mentally ill. In a social media post, she says for 8 years the words have eaten away at her. Other Black Ferns players, sports commentators Dame Valerie Adams and some All Blacks have offered support to Ngā Arena Mate for speaking out. New Zealand Rugby has called her allegations distressing, but believe it is an isolated incident. Felicity Reid reports.
Te Kura Ngata Arana Mate says she could hear her coach's comments in her head as she threw the ball. Too scared to express herself, she let the comments wash over her and didn't speak up. But then it became too much. Te Kura says she had a mental breakdown in front of the team on their Northern tour. In an Instagram post, she says the Black Ferns head coach told her she didn't deserve to be in the team. She was sworn at for wearing a jacket around her hips and was told she was picked only to play the guitar.
Really distressing to read. You never like to see any human describe their own situation in the way that Te Kura has, and we feel for her.
New Zealand Rugby's Chris Lindrum says the allegations are concerning. He's contacted Ngata Arena Mate about the allegation.
Our first priority is to make sure that TK is okay. I've sent her a message this morning just outlining our support and care for her, and that we're here and ready to talk when she is. Clearly we take any issues raised like this incredibly seriously.
The hooker said she was sworn at and, as a teacher, questioned what her students might think of her. Lindrum says he's spoken to the Black Ferns head coach Glenn Moore about the allegations.
He's obviously distressed and upset as well. So, we've got obviously some work ahead of us to explore this issue as part of the review. Glenn will be a part of that. It's obviously a tough time for him and his whānau as well, absorbing those comments.
Lindrum wouldn't say whether Moore confirmed or denied the allegations. However, he says if those comments were said, it's unacceptable.
Respect and inclusion and care and connection are kind of principles that are right at the heart of New Zealand rugby and how we expect our teams to behave and operate. On the face of them, some very serious allegations.
The New Zealand Rugby Players Association says there's a review underway about the Black Ferns program. It says Te Kura's views will be part of that review. Sports psychologist Gary Hermison says the pressure on elite athletes makes them vulnerable. He says the degree to which an athlete feels they belong in the team can also impact on mental health.
Language becomes quite critical, both verbal language but also non-verbal messages as well. And so it's easy for athletes through their vulnerability to either misperceive or sometimes hear quite directly messages that are judgmental or critical or challenging, but challenging in a harmful way.
The Black Ferns lost all 4 games against England and France on the Northern Tour, and Hermison says a situation like that can impact on the whole touring party.
That puts pressure on the athlete, but also puts added pressure on the coaching crew because in many ways the coaches are perhaps more vulnerable about the consequences of performance than the athletes might be.
New Zealand Rugby says a review is underway into the team's Northern Tour.
It is 5:15 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. E a haere aki nei, we go live to Kapiti where the weather is pounding the coast. The days could be numbered for the Thames-Coromandel Mayor chairing meetings in person. The council is considering a vaccine mandate for its facilities. If it goes for it, Sandra Goudie would need to work from home. The Mayor doesn't want the Pfizer vaccine, saying she's waiting for Novavax. Her stance has resulted in a code of conduct complaint and a call from some quarters to step down. Jean Bell reports from Thames.
Today's routine council meeting was very busy for the Thames-Coromandel District Mayor Sandra Goudie. So busy that she couldn't do a quick interview about a code of conduct complaint resulting from her anti-vaccination stance.
Not right now, I've got a few jobs that I have to do. Okay, deal with right now. When could I have probably at the end of the day.
Council Chief Executive Rob Williams also ducked away when I asked him if he had a spare minute.
Not really, no. What do you want to talk to me about?
About the code of conduct complaint.
If you could email me, I'll respond to you.
Oh really? Yeah. Now's not a good time?
No, I'm busy. I've got a lot of things to do.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Sandra Goudie chaired today's proceedings, but her days doing that in person could be numbered. The council's leadership is still deciding whether it'll require vaccine passes in its facilities. Councillor Gary Gottlieb filed a code of conduct complaint after the Mayor allegedly spoke at an anti-vaccine meeting in Coromandel. However, the council considers the complaint internally resolved and did not proceed with an investigation. Following the complaint, Sandra Goudie spoke to an anti-vaccination group in Australia.
It's just ridiculous. I think it's actually time to drop the mandates, drop the borders, open it up and just deal with it.
On the streets of Thames, Roy Mata McGregor says she's horrified by the Mayor's behaviour.
Unbelievably outrageous. They're going to have to change the legislation or the rules around what mayors can and can't get away with. She can't be setting any kind of example like that.
But Elizabeth Savage thinks it's fine.
I think she's brave in making a stand for what she feels is right, and it is a personal opinion, and I think more people in her position should be making a stand, and yeah, I think all power to her.
Thames-Coromandel councillor Robin Sinclair says the council is consulting with elected members and staff on whether they should be required to show a vaccine pass to enter council facilities. She says the Mayor will have to play by the rules if proof of vaccination is required.
It's the same as all the other staff, she'll have to work from home.
And are you surprised that she turned up today?
It's very hard to chair a meeting when you're not in the same room as the people that you are. And she is our Mayor, she is the chair of the committees, so no.
Consultation on vaccine pass requirements for council staff closes today.
And joining me now is Ahorangi Andrew Geddes, law professor at Otago University. Andrew, for starters, legally, where does the Mayor's personal health decisions, when do they become an issue for council?
Well, it'll become an issue for council if the council does adopt this policy of not allowing unvaccinated people onto their property or into their buildings, because I don't really think you can have a policy that says nobody who hasn't been vaccinated can come on, brackets, except the Mayor. So that will, physically prevent her from being able to, enter a council building, sit in her office and so on.
So is there anything preventing her from being a remote Mayor? I mean, one thing that COVID has taught us is a lot of things can be done online. Can you be a Mayor Mayoral 9?
So under the Thames-Coromandel standing orders, there is an allowance for members to attend by electronic means. The person who decides whether that's going to be allowed is the chair of any given meeting, and the chair of the council meetings, of course, is Sandra Goudie. So Sandra Goudie can ask Sandra Goudie whether she can attend electronically council meetings, and I suspect Sandra Goudie would tell Sandra Goudie that's fine.
And is there no way around that?
No way around it in what sense?
Well, if she is guarding the hen house then.
Well, so the power to decide whether or not someone can attend electronically or not is vested in the chair of any given meeting, and the mayor ex officio is the chair of the meetings.
Okay. So on other issues then, she's made various claims and statements on an anti-vaccination platform broadcast, over the internet. I mean, how does that fit with the council's collective support for the government's vaccine rollout? And can she break from that collective support?
So the Thames-Coromandel Council does have a code of conduct, as all councils do. And in that code of conduct, it is required that council members abide by collective decisions that the council has made and, don't speak publicly in the media against those decisions. I haven't listened to the full interview, but if she has called into question the country's sort of vaccination approach and, the vaccination rollout and so on, then that's going against what the Thames-Coromandel Council is, by resolution, supported. She seems to be going against her own council's decision, which would appear to be a breach of the Code of Conduct. So action, a complaint could be made under the Code of Conduct for that particular interview.
Yeah, she does point people in the direction of anti-vaccination support groups. She challenges the mandate and she offers advice on how to get around that if it is a requirement of your job. So in terms of acting in the best interests of the community, what responsibility is there on her in terms of that?
So again, under the Code of Conduct, there are general principles that are expected of all elected officials, one of which is to display a leadership role in the community and to display leadership in the best interests of the community. So, a complaint can be made under the Code of Conduct. Now, whether anything much would come of that is questionable, because the most that could really happen is that the council decide to censure her for her activities, give her a stern telling off. Which, that's probably as much as you actually want councils to really be able to do, though, because, the idea that sort of other councillors could remove a mayor or any other elected official because they're upset at what they're saying does run in the face of, democracy in a sense. People did elect her, and whether other elected members should then be able to get rid of her, that would be problematic, I think.
Is this any more than her exercising her democratic rights to voice her opinions publicly and to make her own personal health decisions?
Certainly she's doing that, but she's doing it as a particular elected official who's got a very high-profile role within her community. And so there's a balance, right? There's a balance between what you can do as an individual, and we all have the rights and freedoms to do so, and your role in a leadership in a community in that sense. Ultimately, this is all going to be decided by the voters. Come October, we're going to have local body elections. If Sandra Goudie chooses to stand again, people will be able to make the decision, as to how she's acting. Within that, the council does have this role of trying to make sure that councillors abide by, their role as elected officials and, don't undermine the council's decisions through what they say. And that's where the Code of Conduct issue comes in. But that can't remove her as an elected official. She'll still have the right to be mayor right through to the voters deciding again in October.
Appreciate your time, Andrew. Interesting to talk to you. That's Andrew Geddes, Otago University Law Professor. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What do you reckon? Where is the line between collective responsibility, exercising your own personal health choices and expressing your opinions in public if you are an elected official? Where do you sit on that one? Also, let us know what you think about the checkpoints that are going to be operating in Northland. There's going to be 2 there, operated by police and iwi. Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Rain has continued to hammer down in Kapiti Coast this afternoon, causing flooding and leaving some residents cut off. Our reporter Tom Kitchen joins me now from Te Horo Beach, just north of Paraparaumu. Tom, you were looking just, well, a little soaked there.
A little soaked. I am completely soaked, Lisa. Look at me and look at the land around me here. Look, it's absolutely, the people in this village over here can't actually get out. And you can see over there, there's a kind of a nervous looking car, thinking if they want to actually brave it and go over. A few of them have, but I mean, your normal cars wouldn't be able to survive this, I can tell you that for sure.
So, Tom, okay, can you ask Sam, who's on camera there, just to pan around to give us a bit of a look? And while Sam does that, can you explain? So I see you, Tom, you're in the front of my picture here, but right behind you, what is it? How high is the water and how long to the road behind you? I'll let you yell out to Sam.
Sam, do you want to give us a bit of a pan around of where we are? Well, I'm walking deeper and deeper into the water, and it's a very long way over to where the village is. I mean, it's a few hundred metres, I'd say. So, yeah, it's quite a scary thing for people to get over, and residents have been telling me that they're quite afraid. A lot of them have tried to get out. A lot of them just wanted to go to, say, a casual supermarket trip, but they can't do that now, and they're stuck here at the moment. Even one person I saw today was walking through this water in jandals. Believe it or not, jandals. They were walking through because they had to get to a meeting, and they were pretty nervous, I think, because they didn't know how deep it was. Even me, myself, I was walking through it as well. I don't know why I did that, because I got absolutely soaked. But hey, it's all in the name of fun, I guess.
So, Tom, I can see that the water is up to kind of mid-shin level on your gumboots, and I am not suggesting you do this, but do you have any idea how deep the water is across the road behind you?
Well, when I went, if I go a bit deeper, I won't go too deep.
No, don't.
It was at least up to my... No, don't? Okay. Well, it was at least up to my knees before when I tried to walk across. It was relatively deep, I can tell you that.
Okay, so what are residents telling you in the area?
Well, residents have told me that, it's frustrating. They've told me it's frustrating. They've also told me this is the worst that they've seen in 30 years. Well, some people have been here for 30 years. This is the worst they've ever seen it. It does flood here quite a bit. It is quite flood prone, but it never gets anything like what we're seeing today.
And what is the forecast looking like, Tom?
The forecast, well, it's still quite wet at the moment. There's a heavy rain watch in place, I understand, till about 11 o'clock tonight, 9, 10, 11 o'clock around then. So residents have to be really careful, and who knows exactly what the damage will be when all these floodwaters go as well. That's the other concern.
Yeah, the only people or creatures that look happy are a few birds that are floating past behind you, Tom. Thanks for joining us there, Tom Kitchen, who's in his full wet weather gear, I should say, but kind of looks like he needs a set of windscreen wipers. He's pretty damp. Armed with data on the unvaccinated, the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency and Waitangi Trust are visiting some of Auckland's least vaccinated areas. Today, Checkpoint was there as they walked the streets of New Windsor and Mount Roskill, parts of which are lagging behind national Māori vaccination rates. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
There's a vaccination centre just down the road here. If you want to get vaccinated, we've got vouchers here as well.
John Ormsby, a man with a megaphone on a mission.
No mai hara mai, come on down and get vaccinated.
While Aucklanders enjoy the relative freedoms of the red light, he's still out roaming the streets of the city's west.
Everyone that gets vaccinated today gets a voucher.
His mission, reaching the areas where vaccine uptake has lagged.
What we're doing is we're targeting the streets where there are predominantly Māori who aren't vaccinated.
Today, Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency and Waitangi Trust is camped in Valonia Reserve in New Windsor. Data released following a High Court stoush with the Ministry of Health telling them this is where they need to be. This is where vaccine rates need to lift.
We're looking at trying to get 53 through here today. So predominantly Māori, but as you can see behind me there, a number of different ethnicities here. So as long as we can get people through here and get them vaccinated, and we're getting a number of first-timers too, that have first vaccinations. So we're dealing with the reluctant ones.
So John does his thing, stomping the footpath, leaning over front yard fences. He hits the skate park.
Trying to figure out if you've been to them. Do you know when you're due for your booster?
Then the construction site.
No, we're all vaccinated on site.
Do you have to be vaccinated now?
Oh, we just made our rule, we are.
Oh, okay. Choice.
The job is all about balance, inviting but not intruding.
Talk to us about the balance here, because you could go right up to people's doors, but is it a bit of a balancing act in terms of that and deciding to be in the area? How do you work that?
What I'm telling them is that we've got a vaccination site here right across the road, and they can come across and be vaccinated if that's their wish. So
you're sort of trying to approach in a subtle way without sort of alienating, I suppose.
Yes. Yep. I think that's it. I believe that it would turn a lot of people off if we started to become so intrusive that we'd bang on doors and then demand that they come out and be vaccinated. That's not what we're trying to do.
Kia ora, Mount Roskill. It's Te Whānau Waitangi here. We're in Mount Roskill today at Belonia Reserve. No mai haere mai, come on down. We've got our fabulous vaccination crew here today.
And it's far from a one-man effort as John hands the megaphone to Sarah Thomas.
Why do you keep doing this?
I've got 2 young children and, I want to ensure that they're safe. I want to ensure that my parents are safe up north, and I cannot wait to get through that border and to hug my parents. I really cannot wait. It's been far too long from seeing them every day when they were living in Auckland, so then moving up north and seeing them every week and not being able to see them during the week, only on the weekends. It's really, really hard. That's why I do this, just to get up to see my parents, for me personally, and protecting my babies. And, our community. I want our community to be strong. I want our community to be safe and protected from whatever comes at us.
Then there's the reinforcements. Pfizer shots and choc tops slowly draw the crowds. This chap's pulled up for a very timely, much-needed second jab.
I'm going to an ultrasound for my girl, and I can't go in if I don't get my second shot. It's in 1:15, so I wanted to get it so I can be part of it.
Really? So you've come in here on the way to that appointment, so now you can say I've had my second shot, then you can go in?
Definitely, yeah. That's it, yeah.
How did you hear about these guys today?
I live across the road. So I just saw it, so I'm like, it's a perfect chance.
Locals continue wandering over from their front yards, those megaphone messages appearing to do the trick.
Just a few houses down, and I heard her through my kitchen window, so yeah, she came down. I didn't know this was happening here today. I was watering my garden, and then I heard them on the loudspeaker, and I'm like, okay, do it.
Māori vaccination rates in some of these suburbs sit well below the national average of 68%. Wesley West is just around the corner. It's down at 61%. So while Auckland opens up, the job here is far from finished.
And ka pai for the mahi on the megaphone there. And if you were listening, we'll chuck the video up from our two Nicks on our webpage so you can check it out. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei e checkpoint, how the vaccine pass killed a Christmas lunch, the fight to stop corrections converting a youth facility into a COVID quarantine unit, and the delightful story of a penguin and the huddle of humans who helped save him. Ho mai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ane Amarama, mina pita pita kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. The police will only set up 2 checkpoints for vehicles heading into Northland this summer, and not every car will be stopped. Topical Border Control have been calling for checkpoints to keep unvaccinated travellers out of Northland. But police say the checkpoints won't stop every car, and it will be 24/7 for a short time before moving to spot checks across Topical. The checkpoints have created some controversy, with ACT leader David Seymour labelling the people who stop people travelling freely as thugs. But Te Party Māori co-leaders have endorsed the work of iwi manning the checkpoints. Debbie Ngarewa-Packett says the people are only protecting their communities. She says if that's Mr Seymour's description, then she and fellow co-leader Rawiri Waititi are two of the biggest thugs, as they've done similar work. David Seymour is defending his comments, saying they don't relate specifically to iwi members manning the checkpoints. The new leader of the opposition has had his first face-off with the government in Parliament, with Christopher Luxon questioning Jacinda Ardern about the level of intensive care beds available for the pandemic. Mr Luxon accused the government's failure to quickly increase capacity was just another measure of it promising much and delivering little. But Ms Ardern says her idea of delivery is the country's low COVID-19 numbers and death rate and strength of the economy. A law academic says there is nothing stopping the Thames-Coromandel Mayor Sandra Goudie from sticking by her refusal to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Ms Goudie's controversial stance is creating division in the region, with one councillor filing a complaint against her behaviour. But Otago University's law professor Andrew Geddes told Checkpoint any move by councillors to remove her as an elected official would be problematic. Those are the headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei, ko taku hoa e nai ko Nicholas Poynton, who's here to talk business. And Nicholas, shall we start with Sky TV shares? And they jump on a major earnings upgrade. What's the deal?
Yeah, we saw shares in the company jump as high as 20% early this morning in early trading. That's after the company notified the market that it expects to nearly double its net profit and lifted the bottom of its revenue guidance for the current financial year. Now, these gains follow the announcement of some major cost savings by the business. Now, the company's chief executive, Sophie Maloney, says it's been able to cut out a further $35 million of costs. That's by going through every single one of the expenses that the company has. Now, most of this came from trimming how much it's spent on vendors, contractors, marketing and capital expenditure. And about 3/4 of these were recurring savings, meaning that the company will have a much slimmer operation in the years to come, which is perhaps what got shareholders so excited this morning. The other encouraging thing for investors was that the company says it's identified longer-term cost savings that are expected to flow through to its earnings in the next financial year. So after all the excitement this morning, the share price did ease somewhat, close up 17% at $2.06 per share.
And Nicholas, Air New Zealand outlines a plan to reach net zero emissions by 2050.
Yeah, that seems like quite a hefty goal, especially for an airline, but the national carrier unveiled 4 pathways it could take to try and hit this goal, or a combination it might draw upon to try and reach that target. They included zero emissions aircraft, operational efficiency, fleet renewal, and sustainable aviation fuel. And the airline says that that sustainable aviation fuel, that had the biggest potential for it to decarbonise the business's carbon footprint, with the possibility of cutting half of its emissions in the next 30 years. Zero emissions aircraft, that's planes that are hydrogen powered, they could help it slash emissions by a further 20%. Now, there were some strong comments from Greg Foran about this announcement today, saying that despite the deleterious consequences of the pandemic that it's posed for its business, international travel effectively grinding to a halt, he still feels like climate change was the single biggest issue facing its business. He says it's never been more important for airlines to take bold steps on genuine climate action. He says the airline is continuing to work with aircraft manufacturers to speed up the arrival of those zero emissions aircraft. So the share price up 3%. The market did react quite favourably to this announcement, taking its share price to $1.54 per share.
That said, let's take a quick flight through the markets.
Yeah, the NZX is up a mere 12 points to 12,610. The dollar is trading at 67.6 US cents and 95.6 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite, Nicholas Poynton there with business. A Dunedin charity lunch that normally feeds hundreds of people on Christmas Day is off because of COVID complications, including navigating whether guests are vaccinated or not. The Act of Kindness charity usually lays on a meal for about 500 people with 150 volunteers at the town hall, bringing together people who might otherwise be on their own at Christmas. The charity didn't want to be faced with the prospect of turning some people away, but after considering a bunch of other options, was forced to cancel. Well, joining me now is trustee Grant Hardy. Kia ora, Grant. This must be, well, it's a bit of a bummer, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's some of the fallout complications from the COVID situation.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's more than a meal. It brings people together. So, I mean, was there no way of coming up with a different plan?
Well, the point of the whole meal was it's about getting people who are alone to come together, and so we make a point of creating kind of a family atmosphere, but there was no other way really. We couldn't figure a way around it. I mean, holding lots of little meals all over the place would have been really difficult, but at the end of the day, you know, the problems we faced were quite many really, and that some of our volunteers, our key volunteers, weren't vaccinated. When we had to make this call in early November, the vaccine system and the passports weren't really available. We didn't know a lot of uncertainties, and so we couldn't really run the event without our key people and personnel. Plus, we also didn't know how many people were going to be vaccinated and unvaccinated. Like a lot of the people that come to the dinner, a good portion wouldn't be vaccinated. That was our understanding. And so how could you turn those people away? Sure, they register, but we don't have any registration stickers or tickets. And I think that the purpose of the event was to, you know, show kindness to people, and it really didn't fit with the ethos of the whole charity that you would, you know, create a disunity in our community by doing that, and it didn't really fit with us either. Apart from the obvious complications, you know, of where COVID was going anyway, because we didn't know.
So, Grant, you weren't even comfortable with maybe having two different sittings for lunch?
Well, for a start off, it wasn't in our contract agreement with DVML down here using the town hall, but it's. I don't think that. I don't know if that would have solved any of our problems, to be honest. You know, you still got the same issues. What would that solve, really? You know, it doesn't really solve anything.
So what kind of hole do you reckon it leaves not being able to have this?
That's a good question. It's. I think that, I mean, we have this environment, unfortunately, of fear that's come across this nation, and it's been a created thing, largely, and so people are a little frightened of socialising with other people anyway, it seems, especially a lot of the people who come to this are isolated, lonely people anyway. So this has isolated them even further, I think, to a certain extent. And it's also the vaccinated and unvaccinated issue has created quite a lot of division in this country. And it's almost so that it's actually worse of a problem than COVID. There's like a separation and a divisional kind of attitude or spirit that's come across the place, and you can see it starting to manifest itself. And so I'm not even sure whether the thing would have worked that well anyway, to be honest.
So are you doing anything else, like food parcels or anything at all in lieu of the dinner?
Well, we did look at doing food parcels, but we had similar issues that, you know, how do you know who you're delivering to? So some people wouldn't feel comfortable, maybe volunteers of delivering to people that weren't vaccinated or whatever. I mean, you're getting this. The thing is that what I'm seeing in the community is there's a fear that's in the community, and there's almost a prejudice coming in about vaccinated and unvaccinated, and those who are unvaccinated are getting marginalised in a big way. And so we're seeing this thing, and it's separating people out. And, you know, that didn't seem to work either. The difficulties of doing that wasn't our skill set, as it were, anyway, to do that. We went like a Meals on Wheels thing, but we did look at it to try and do it. What we are doing is banging together a couple of thousand goodie bags, and we're going to drop those around to the council flats and places like that, and people that would be by themselves, and give them a nice wee message in it and a bit of a G-up. But that's about the best we can do. But it is highlighting to us as a trust that there is an issue that's developing in the country of separation. That's not the country I grew up in. And, you know, at the start of the COVID thing, we were a team of 5 million, and now we're not that anymore. And so there's something that's happening, and I can see it. And it's growing and growing and growing almost weekly. And especially since they've brought out these vaccine rules and laws, it seems to be getting worse.
Really appreciate time, Grant. Thanks for joining us. That is Grant Hardy, who's from the Act of Kindness charity, cancelled their Christmas meal because, well, they were thinking it was a bit complicated negotiating who's vaccinated and who is not. First face-off, first fumble, Christopher Luxon has made his parliamentary debut as opposition leader, going head-to-head with the Prime Minister. The caucus met this morning after yesterday's reshuffle, but the refreshed team was missing one conspicuous member. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
It was hardly the battle of titans as billed.
May I begin by congratulating the member on his new role?
Does she agree with... sorry?
I reject that question.
Sorry. Why did her government choose...
A bit of day one jitters in their first parliamentary face-off. Christopher Luxon and Jacinda Ardern going toe-to-toe in the debating chamber for the first time.
Does she agree the failure to increase ICU beds during a pandemic is quite simply another illustration of her government's ongoing failure to deliver and to actually get things done?
Mr. Speaker, my view of delivery is the lowest case numbers in the OECD, the lowest level of hospitalisation, the lowest death rate.
Neither landed a knockout blow, neither covered themselves with glory, both with room for improvement.
It is certainly different from the world I've come from, but that's exciting. No, I think I'll get better and better.
Chris Luxon has promised an opposition reset, his rejuvenated team regrouping at Parliament today, his predecessors pledging to put the past behind them. New finance man Simon Bridges.
Yesterday was yesterday, today is, I think, the future.
And a resurrected Todd Muller.
The thing with turning the page is that you actually have to turn the page. Put the backpack of grievance down. That was then, this is now, and we've got to move forward on that basis. So
that leaves just one former leader in Judith Collins, demoted to number 19 yesterday, and nowhere to be seen.
She's on leave, I think. I haven't seen her today, so I don't know if she's actually here, but I don't see why she wouldn't be here.
To be honest with you, I don't run her diary, so I've got no idea where she is.
She texted to say she was on leave, but gave no reason why. Her absence undercuts the talk of better tomorrows and suggests it's not all kumbaya in caucus. Todd McClay has plunged from the number 6 spot to the bottom of the pack, the unranked morass.
It gives me the amount of respect I deserve. You can interpret that however you like. Thank you.
And Michael Woodhouse, formerly of Finance, has fallen from 4 to number 18.
Everybody wants to progress, and I've gone backwards. I'm not going to hide that disappointment, but that's a moment in time. I've got new challenges now, and I'm looking forward to getting into them.
Then there's Harete Hipango, a Judith Collins loyalist. Despite holding the key Māori development portfolio, as well as Oranga Tamariki and Whānau Ora, she does not make the shadow cabinet.
Life has its ups and its downs, and I'm fairly settled where things are at.
Anyone from anywhere on our rankings can take the case and make the case on their portfolios. And what I would say to you, by putting Māori Crown relations with Shane Ritty and expecting him to play a very big leadership role with Māori is really important.
Diversity has been a stumbling block for national leaders past, with last year's front bench whitewash still fresh in people's minds. But if today is the future, as Simon Bridges says, Chris Luxon will be pleased. A few nerves, a few niggles. Compared to Todd Muller's day one, this was a dream run.
A bunch of you are getting in touch about Thames-Coromandel District Mayor Sandra Goudie, who is not a fan of COVID vaccination. She is waiting, she says, for the Novavax jab, and potentially the council is looking at mandating that you have to be vaccinated to enter council buildings, which kind of leaves a question mark of how she's going to continue doing her mayoral duties. This person says Sandra Goudie clearly has a conflict of interest and should stand down. She can't, as a mayor, expect to be able to organise actively against the work of her council in her own time. This would not be tolerated in the private sector, and I can't believe that the TCDC are putting up with it. Teachers got in touch to say, I'm a teacher, a public servant. I've been employed as per the mayor. I have to toe the line and have a vaccination for COVID. Lots of us have had to, or we have no job. It's our professional and social responsibility. Scott, though, says, I understand Sandra won't be popular with her opinion. I'm personally pro-vax, but not into this mandate. Good to have elected people stand up for what they feel is ethically right. Good on her. But Ewan says, Goudie has to go. We cannot have an anti-vax mayor here in the middle of an epidemic which is taking lives. She is running a council, not a rabbit hole. And this one, what happens if other councillors refuse to attend council meetings because she is not vaccinated? It is 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And Muriaki ina pita pita kōrero after the news at 6. As Aucklanders enjoy their newfound freedoms, they give up on parking rules. Families of young men who spent time in the Hawke's Bay Regional Prison Youth Unit are devastated it could be adapted for quarantine. The Department of Corrections is considering using the youth units in Christchurch and Hastings for prisoners with COVID-19. It sparked outrage from families and specialists. Katie Doyle reports.
Like a family away from family. That's how Silvana describes the Hawke's Bay Regional Prison Youth Unit. Her son recently spent time there, arriving in December last year.
It's sad when your child goes to prison, but it's great to hear that he's looked after and there's people that you know their names and their positions that you can hold responsible for things.
Birthdays were celebrated, families could keep in regular contact, and the head of the unit was a father figure. Silvana is shocked Corrections is considering adapting the Hawke's Bay and Christchurch youth units to care for COVID cases. She believes they are hugely important.
It will be crucial for these kids to kind of have this wraparound family, away from family thing, have good role models that they look up to, have this same age sort of brothers.
So does the grandmother of another teenager who spent time in the Hawke's Bay unit.
I think it's an appalling loss for our youth. I think it's a dreadful mistake.
Since leaving, her grandson has stayed out of trouble and is getting his life back on track. And that includes dealing with his addiction.
He formed positive relationships with the guards and the other youth in there. He got NCEA credits, did his schoolwork and did it well. It was enormously positive.
Dr. Valerie McGinn is a clinical neuropsychologist who works with young offenders and specialises in fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. She says youth units are the worst possible part of a prison system to repurpose. Youth prisoners need to be kept away from adult inmates and held in a place where staff understand their developmental needs.
I think if those facilities aren't available and young people, especially those with neurodisability who are many, many years immature, are placed in mainstream prison, you're literally putting them on a conveyor belt into the adult criminal justice system.
Corrections Chief Custodial Officer Neil Beale says no final decisions have been made. He understands the reaction but says Corrections has to deal with the threat of COVID-19, which it's managed well so far.
I look at what's happening in prisons around the world and it's absolutely horrifying. We are seeing deaths of prisoners, we're seeing deaths of staff in the States, in Europe, in the UK.
Neil Beale says there are a variety of factors to consider when picking a unit for quarantine, including ventilation and proximity to hospital. He says the youth units fit the bill, but they are not the only ones being considered at the moment.
A shark, a penguin and a bloke on a bike with a backpack and a wine box, all part of an epic tale of survival made possible by a huddle of humans. 2 weeks ago, hikers found a mauled tawaki or Fiordland-crested penguin that had washed up on Munro Beach in South Western and was cooking in the hot sun. It's the third rarest of the species. Spoiler alert, this does end well, but it took a bit. One of the walkers kept the penguin shaded while the other one dashed back to the road where there was cell coverage and called Doc. Now, Doc called Dr. Jerry McSweeney from the Wilderness Lodge Lake Moraki, and Jerry joins me now. So, Jerry, you get the call that says there's this penguin cooking in the hot sun. What's your rescue vehicle? And you hightail it down there, and what is it?
Well, you shelve all your other meetings and jobs, and I thought, no, there's a bicycle here, mountain bike, and it takes 45 minutes to walk down there, and it took 7 minutes to bike down. But first of all, I grabbed a couple of stout leather gloves and a backpack, because I thought, well, I can tuck it in there, and if it is survivable, bring it back.
So when you got there and you checked this little fella out, what did you make of the injuries?
Yeah, well, then this really good Irish couple had found it on the beach, as you said, cooking in the sun, and it had lacerations across its back and also bleeding from its feet. But the front part of it was very perky, so clearly it had an injury, either a shark or a bashed against the rocks. And if we could sort that out, it did have a future. And I've been advised by a vet, Inga Bolt, that she worked at Haas for quite a long time now, moved to Golden Bay, that it is worth saving these penguins because they're really good for giving vets practice at looking after them in case, we had a major oil spill or something and they had to look after a whole lot of them.
So you're hooned back to the lodge on your bike with the penguin in your backpack, and then it's a bit of sort of pass the parcel, like an Olympic relay almost. Who do you give the penguin to, and how does he get to Christchurch?
Well, it was a wonderful example of West Coasters all cooperating with the Christchurch Wildlife Hospital, coordinated by the Department of Conservation. We had Jeff Marks from Development West Coast, who's the tourism expert in the glacier region, visiting us. And I said, right, Jeff, you're driving up to where you live at Fox next. He said, I'd love to do it. We found a big Greywacke Chardonnay box. It was a bigger wine box than the normal ones, and it meant the penguin could stretch out. Jeff drove to Fox. There he was met by Jackie and Anya, Sarah, and from the Department of Conservation team. And they had one of their workers through the Jobs for Nature scheme is Neil McCone from Glacier Shuttles in Franz Joseph. And the next morning, Neil drove it to Hokitika Airport, which is 160 kilometres, and there it was put on the first Air New Zealand plane to Christchurch, where the Christchurch Wildlife Hospital is. And it was kind of funny because at the airport, it was put into a special wildlife box called Kiwis for Kiwis, which is normally used for transporting kiwis around, but it did the job for this penguin. The penguin. So out of the wine box and into the proper box. Got to the wildlife hospital, and what kind of patch-up did he need? Well, this was about 10 days ago, and I've got to say that we all liaised about it and gave it about a 50-50 chance of survival. Karen Talbot of the Christchurch Wildlife Hospital, they're a voluntary group and they do great work. She realised it was malnourished, about half its normal weight. When it had been at the Wilderness Lodge, it had actually swum in a little pond and done a lot of drinking. So clearly that had helped because it was dehydrated, but it was also malnourished. So Karen worked on getting food and liquid into it. And then on the 1st of December, the vet at the Wildlife Hospital, Pauline Howard, operated on it. She stitched up the lacerations on its back where the shark or barracuda had bitten it. And then she sewed up its feet and put these gorgeous little green booties on it. And as of yesterday, it was eating fish like a little pig and looking really good. He's looking pretty tubby and fantastic. And before you go, Jerry, just the great conclusion to this story. What is the penguin called, please? Well, the Wildlife Hospital called it Jerry. We actually called it Mr. Munro because Sydney Zoo has a field and crested called Mr. Munro that was found on a beach in New South Wales. They fed it up, and every day at 3 o'clock, apparently at Sydney Zoo, it jumps on a box and eats fish. So we thought, well, this is Mr. Munro, but no, the Wildlife Hospital, they do great work, and they've called it Jerry. And so in about perhaps a month's time, fully recovered, we hope we can put it back into Munro's Beach and it will swim south to between New Zealand and the Antarctic, where all the rest of its fellow penguins spend 7 months feeding and sleeping on the water. What a fantastic story, Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Dr. Jerry McSweeney, penguin rescuer. The US has announced a diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics in Beijing, meaning no government official will attend the Games. The White House says it wants to send a clear message that human rights abuses in China cannot be tolerated. American athletes will still participate in the Games. Our correspondent Simon Marks reports.
The news was confirmed by the White House after multiple media organisations reported that the diplomatic boycott of the Games was in the pipeline. It means neither President Biden nor the First Lady nor any other US government official will be present in Beijing to provide the Games with the American government's imprimatur. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki explained why.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses. The athletes on Team USA have our full support. We will be behind them 100% as we cheer them on from home, but we will not be contributing to the fanfare of the Games.
And she made it clear that it's the repression of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, the US terms it a genocide, that lies at the heart of President Biden's decision. The announcement comes just days after a virtual summit with President Xi Jinping, at which the Chinese leader notably did not invite President Biden to attend the Games, as had been anticipated.
U.S. diplomatic or official representation would treat these Games as business as usual in the face of the PRC's egregious human rights abuses and atrocities in Xinjiang, and we simply can't do that. As the President has told President Xi, standing up for human rights is in the DNA of Americans. We have a fundamental commitment to promoting human rights, and we feel strongly in our position, and we will continue to take actions to advance human rights in China and beyond.
So she was asked, is the US government now urging its allies around the world to follow suit and engage in a diplomatic boycott of the Games themselves?
We have informed them of our decision, and obviously we will leave it to them to make their own decisions.
Why not pull American athletes from the Olympics?
I don't think that we felt it was the right step to penalize athletes who have been training, preparing for this moment, and we felt that we could send a clear message by not sending an official U.S. delegation.
But many Republicans disagree with that, arguing it is not sufficient simply to pull official recognition of the Games. They want America's athletes pulled out as well, and some are also calling for American companies to be banned from sponsoring the Beijing Olympics.
The Deputy Prime Minister and Sports Minister Grant Robertson says New Zealand won't be sending any diplomats either. He says there's a range of factors at play, but it's mostly due to COVID-related travel complications. Hey, and I forgot to tell you just before, if you wanted to see Jerry, the rescued penguin, all the photos will be on our webpage and video.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Topical Border Control says visitors heading to Northland will pass through checkpoints easily if everyone in their vehicle has a vaccine pass. 2 checkpoints are being set up for when Aucklanders are allowed out of the city next week, one near Urititi and the other near Maunga Turoto. Police will be stopping vehicles and Topical Border Control teams will be checking for documentation. Border Control Regional Coordinator Ruben Taipari says people will be moved through easily if they're organised with the right information.
You just show it to the person with the technology of scanning that is there, the interviewer. They will immediately go through it. Once it's all done, it's a matter of they have a sticker that they put on your car just to show that you've been through there. It's a great sticker saying thank you to everybody.
Ruben Taipari says anyone without a vaccine pass who can't prove a negative COVID result may have to complete a rapid antigen test. A law expert says censoring the Thames-Coromandel mayor for her views could be the most her fellow councillors can do. Sandra Goudie has rejected the Pfizer vaccine and says she's waiting for the Novavax jab, which is not yet available in New Zealand. Councillor Gary Gottlieb filed a complaint alleging the mayor spoke at an anti-vaccine meeting, but councillors dropped it. Otago University law professor Andrew Geddes has told Checkpoint a stern telling off is the limit of the council's powers.
The idea that sort of other councillors could remove a mayor or any other elected official because they're upset at what they're saying does run in the face of, democracy in a sense. People did elect her.
Andrew Geddes says the ultimate decision will rest with voters in October's local body elections. Many businesses in Franz Josef and Fox Glacier are struggling to find workers. With estimates, the area is facing a staffing shortage in the hundreds for a summer period expected to bring much-needed visitors to the region. Lake Matheson Cafe owner Chris Alexander says they'd usually have about 30 staff now, with up to 45 at its peak. He says they'll be sticking to the 5 staff they currently have, as it's nearly impossible to find new staff as there's too much uncertainty. A recent survey has also found at least 16 businesses in the area have ceased operating. A co-chair of the National Māori Pandemic Response Group says the Crown ignored the very advice it sought in the COVID response. Rawiri Jansen was giving evidence on the second day of a Waitangi Tribunal hearing into the pandemic response for Māori. He says the vaccine rollout and plans for COVID patients to isolate at home were developed without any thought for Māori needs and disparities. Dr Jansen, who's also a GP in South Auckland, says officials have ignored the advice of Māori health experts.
It's not tino rangatiratanga if Māori are required to submit competing proposals for Crown officials to select to be funded. It is not equity if we get vaccinated last. It is not partnership when the Crown ignores advice.
The hearing continues until Friday. The deed of settlement for 7 hapu of Ahuriri has passed its third and final reading in Parliament. The Mana Ahuriri deed of settlement recognises that the Crown breached Te Tiriti o Waitangi, leaving the hapu virtually landless and causing generational distress. MP for Ikaroa Rāwhiti Meka Whaitiri says it's been a long journey, but today is a day to celebrate.
I'm under no illusion that both the apology and the cultural redress and the financial redress in this settlement will aid and abet the opportunities that these hapu so well deserve.
The grandmother of a teenager who was incarcerated in the Hawke's Bay Regional Prison Youth Unit is devastated it could be turned into a COVID ward. It comes following news the Department of Corrections is looking at using youth units in Christchurch and Hawke's Bay to house prisoners with COVID-19. One woman says her grandson's time in Hawke's Bay helped him get his life back on track.
He formed positive relationships with the guards and the other youth in there. He got NCEA credits, did his schoolwork and did it well. It was enormously positive.
The woman says her grandson has kept out of trouble since leaving the unit. And the head of a US company has come under fire after sacking around 900 of his staff on a single Zoom call. The BBC's James Clayton has more.
Getting sacked is never great. Getting sacked a couple of weeks away from Christmas is worse. To have it done on a Zoom call with 900 other employees, well, that's what happened to workers at Better.com. If you're on this call, you're part of the unlucky group being laid off, the company's CEO Vishal Garg said. Last time I did this, I cried, he added. Social media users described the move as cold and harsh.
And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples the latest from French for Rabbits. The gender-transitioning Joe Stockhausen is excited about the future. And our largely libertarian thinker and New Zealand Initiative chief economist Eric Crampton has been thinking about supermarkets. No, not the ones with invisible hands, but the ones that sell us our daily bread. Are reports of a lack of competition exaggerated? On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And looking at the short forecast from mid-service to midnight Wednesday for Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Cloudy, a few showers, some possibly heavy tomorrow afternoon and evening. For the remaining North Island areas, periods of rain heavy at times, clearing from Manawatu southwards tonight or tomorrow morning. Rain elsewhere easing to showers tomorrow morning, some heavy in the afternoon and evening with possible thunderstorms for Hawke's Bay. Marlborough and Nelson partly cloudy with isolated showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. For Bulla and Westland partly cloudy, isolated showers, clearing for Bulla this evening. In Canterbury mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, clearing tonight, partly cloudy for tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland mostly fine. However, isolated showers inland this evening and the showers developing about the fjords tomorrow morning and late rain is expected for Stewart Island. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi marama. And no mai haere mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen Tēnā. Bureaucratic hurdles, slow responses and sidelining of Māori experts have been detailed before the Waitangi Tribunal today. Today was the second day of an urgent hearing into how the pandemic response has affected Māori, who are now the group most affected by COVID and with the slowest vaccine uptake. Jamie Tahana is following the hearing.
In May, staff from Whakatāne Māori health provider Te Puna Ora o Matatoa gathered at a glam event in Auckland, the Primary Health Awards, where they won the Ministry of Health's Equity Award for a mobile clinic. Today, Deputy Chief Executive Shelley Cunningham noted a certain irony in that, because while it was being celebrated for one mobile clinic, Te Puna Ora was battling the ministry for funds to set up mobile COVID testing and vaccine clinics.
Even with this evidence, we continue to face significant barriers when we're trying to roll out our COVID-19 pandemic response.
Te Puna Ora o Matatoa is giving vaccines across much of Eastern Bay of Plenty, small towns with mostly Māori populations and high rates of deprivation. The area has one of the country's lowest vaccination rates, particularly for Māori. But Chief Operations Officer Lee Colquhoun told the tribunal it didn't need to be this way. He says they told authorities early on the rollout would need a whānau focus and to go to the people. Mr Colquhoun says they were repeatedly rebuffed. It didn't fit the plan. Now they're playing catch up.
If you look at the last month, we've had a massive increase in those areas. Some really successful approaches. We know our communities, we know what's needed in those ones, but to get given funding 3 weeks ago and expected to put it in place, we're only just starting to see that increase.
Today, the tribunal heard from health providers and experts who outlined regular bureaucratic hurdles and of being sidelined by officials. A co-chair of Te Rōpū Whakakaupapa Uruta, Rawiri Jansen, says the Crown ignored the very advice it sought about how to reach Māori.
It's not tino rangatiratanga if Māori are required to submit competing proposals for Crown officials to select to be funded. It is not equity if we get vaccinated last. It is not partnership when the Crown ignores advice.
COVID-19 modeller Sean Hendy outlined the planning phase of the vaccine rollout. His modelling showed a significant disparity even when age was factored in. A 59-year-old Māori with no comorbidities, he said, still had the same risk of hospitalisation as an 80-year-old Pākehā. For that reason, he said he recommended Māori should be included in earlier age groups for the vaccine rollout. But that didn't happen.
I think it is particularly clear that the work that we did for impacts on Māori, particularly around the health risks, was not taken into account in the vaccine rollout. And it's hard to understand why.
The tribunal also heard from representatives of the Māori disabled and deaf communities, who outlined how they too were sidelined by the process and how access has been difficult. A public health expert, Associate Professor Elena Curtis, called for a coordinated hub of Māori experts to be part of the process. She says providers are offering solutions that are largely going ignored, or are only picked up when a mainstream approach fails.
It's hard when you offer solutions, but there's just so much scrutiny of those solutions to the nth degree. Well, you know that the other solution is zero, or substandard, and yet you have to try and argue and convince and look for every single pitfall that could happen when the system's actually already falling down over there.
The hearing continues, with the Crown due to provide its evidence on Thursday.
During 107 days of COVID lockdown, Aucklanders' lives were dominated by rules. Stay home, mask up, keep your distance, and that's just a taster. So it may come as no surprise that now the traffic light system has the city moving again. Some have been rebelling against parking regulations, refusing to stay in their lane or off the footpath and beaches. And it's leading to nail-ups at some popular summer spots. Well, joining us now is Auckland Transport Parking Compliance Manager, Rick Bidgood. Hi, Rick.
Hi Lisa, how's things?
Very well, thank you. Can you tell us what are some of the rule breaking that you're seeing?
I think the best way to sum it up is we've been locked down for such a long period of time, it's just getting used to what the new normal is. So some of the things are just taking a little bit of extra time, a little bit of silly parking, I suppose, and a bit of inconsiderate activity in on the streets.
Silly parking, describe that to me, Rick. What does that look like?
Oh, I'm just going to pull up right in the middle of the footpath so I can run in and grab something just here whilst pedestrians have to walk in the main carriage lane to get around the vehicle that's on the footpath. That type of silly parking, quite unsafe too. So I guess as we emerge back from COVID, be a little bit more considerate and be community-minded would be my recommendation.
So if people forgotten how to drive, or when there were no cars on the road, they could basically do what they want, so they're just keeping on doing it?
No, we were still out and about during COVID level 4 and level 3 in a limited capacity, but due to the fact we had level 4 and Delta this time around, it was a totally unknown realm for us, so operations were a little bit strained and a little bit difficult, as was the time for all of Aucklanders during that long extended period.
So in terms of interacting with people who are doing the silly parking, how is that going? What level of aggression are your people experiencing?
We're not finding any greater levels of aggression. The things that we are finding a little bit is more frustration points from members of the public. They've been locked down for so long. It's their only opportunity to get into retail, to get into hospitality. And having to conform yet again is being a little bit more challenging for some, but not all, that's for sure.
So I've seen on, I think it was your Instagram account or one of those social media accounts, that at one of the Auckland beaches you had people basically parking up on the sand.
We did, unfortunately, at Castor Bay. It was not too pleasant to deal with. And so, the other side of that is, I suppose, the marine ecology side. Vehicles aren't really meant for a beach. There's a whole heap of safety reasons. But also, what's the vehicle doing to the marine ecology when the tide comes in?
So what do they think? They're at the mall or something?
That's a really quite difficult one to ascertain what people are thinking at the moment. But yeah, I guess, it's been locked down, the sun was shining, they jump in the car, they go to the beach, there's limited parking up in the car park, so they thought, boat ramp, we'll drive down, we'll park on the beach. Just, again, not being community-minded or considerate, that's all.
Rick, what's the worst thing you've seen in recent times?
Oh, God, Lisa, I don't think that's really fit for the air. But we've seen our fair share with regards to unreasonable activity, let's call it.
Unreasonable activity? What's that, Rick?
Unreasonable, best way to describe it. When you kind of ask somebody to do something that they blatantly shouldn't be doing, and then you get 150 reasons why they can do it, and they continue to do so for an extended period of time, just unreasonable. And a little bit, I don't know, the cantankerous attitude, I suppose. But again, people being locked up for so long, you've got to expect people to be wound up a little bit more these days.
So are your enforcement people, are they working in pairs these days?
Absolutely. So all the way through level 4 and level 3, we've been what we call double bubbles for safety and security reasons, but also buddy control as well. We don't know what the marketplace is looking like at the moment. We don't know what response factors are like. And certainly when we get called into remote areas, it pays to have somebody alongside of you. And that's pretty much standard, and it'll be standard for a little while in the future as well.
So, Rick, you're basically on high alert for trouble.
Not so much high alert, it's high awareness. And, you've got to really have your eyes and ears open with regards to situational awareness and environmental awareness, but also a full understanding of, the pressures that people are in at this moment in time, because it has not been easy for everybody, that's for sure.
So some of the dodgy parking you were describing, what would that cost you if you got ticketed?
$40, $60, and if you were towed, $130, $140. So, it's not a very wise decision if your money was tied over COVID, that's for sure.
And the other thing is, as increasingly the weather gets better and people are going to start flocking to the beach, another pressure point was Point Chev Beach. That was another one that people were talking about, the buses unable to get down and turn around there. But, as the weather gets better, people are going to be going more to these hotspots. So what is your message to them?
My message across summer for all of Auckland is, as we emerge and really enjoy the fantastic weather that's just around the corner, be courteous, be considerate, and be a little bit more community-minded in your choices in not only parking, but how you get to and from and how you use those fantastic spaces that we have in Auckland.
Rick, you seem like an honest bloke. When was the last time you got a parking ticket?
I can honestly say I haven't received a parking ticket since I've been in my role for 14 years, but I did get 2 bus lane tickets, which I promptly paid. I was having an argument with my partner on the way to an auction and wasn't really watching what I was doing. So 2 in 14 years.
So,
sorry.
Yeah, wow, even the best of us get caught out, Rick. Thanks for joining us. That's Rick Bidgood, who is the Auckland Transport Parking Compliance Manager there. And bottom line, park nicely or it will cost you over the summer. It is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The government has unveiled a 25-year plan to stop domestic and sexual violence, but those at the coalface say now is the time for the real mahi to ensure this isn't just lip service. The strategy promises to bring agencies together to make long-term change. But the opposition says the government could be doing more to immediately respond to the increased need due to COVID-19. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
The government spends $1.5 to $2 billion every year on the consequences of family and sexual violence. But as Shine's Rachel Kane explains, the human cost is far greater.
Some people may feel like they have to leave their community, leave their house, leave their home. They may be forced to leave their jobs, and then the impact of not having an income, not being surrounded by their friends and family.
And the stats also paint a sombre picture. Last year, there were 165,000 family violence investigations recorded by the police. Young people exposed to such violence are twice as likely to attempt suicide. Over 12 months, almost 168,000 sexual assault incidents happened in this country. Almost half of victims were between 15 and 29 years old. And Rachel Kane says the severity and complexity of cases has worsened since the start of the pandemic.
So, for example, one of the key tactics of family violence is isolation, cutting people off from their friends and family and from those support. Of course, lockdown makes that worse. Lockdown assists that isolation.
Today, the government announced a 25-year strategy, which will bring 10 agencies together for a collective response, something those on the front line have long been advocating for. Women are 3 times as likely as men to experience intimate partner violence, and Wahine Māori are more likely to be impacted by violence than any other ethnicity. Earlier in the year, the Auditor General expressed his concerns about how the joint venture would work with Māori. But the Minister Marama Davidson says Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Mātauranga Māori and whānau are central to the strategy, thanks to a Tangata Whenua advisory group.
The Tangata Whenua advisory group will provide independent advice directly to me as the lead minister.
Women's Refuges Ange Jury says time will tell if the strategy will work.
Much of the next year is going to be about fleshing out exactly how some of that's going to happen, working out the governance arrangements, working out the timings, working out the money, all those sorts of things. But look, it's a good start, but it is only a start, and I think we need to recognise that.
National spokesperson Louise Upston was sceptical of it bringing about real change at the speed it's needed.
I think if most New Zealanders read it, they'd be like, what does this mean? What does this mean in terms of what the services are in my neighbourhood? What does it mean if I'm in crisis and I need to leave? Where am I going to live?
She reckons it would be better to focus on the police's integrated safety response model and improving measuring the reporting of harm to children. But Marama Davidson pushed back that work wasn't happening fast enough.
We have lacked action for decades for successive governments. We finally have a strategy and an action plan, 40 actions in it. Most of them have already started.
But everyone is in agreement. This national crisis isn't going away anytime soon.
Dozens of people living in caravans at a showground near the New South Wales-Queensland border have celebrated the announcement of the border reopening. All fully vaccinated people can visit the Sunshine State from Monday, 4 days earlier than planned. But some Queenslanders are worried about the potential rise in COVID cases. The ABC's Annie Guest has more.
Freedom! From commiserating together to celebrating.
Yeah, a little bit of a celebration drink, and it's our little dose of sanity at the end of each day.
61-year-old Queenslander Steve Kemp is among 150 people who've been living at the Mayoral showgrounds since August after getting stuck on the wrong side of the border.
I've got a bus-converted motorhome, and I tow a car behind that, and I have a bike. I was in Victoria helping out a family member down there with some property and get caught up in their COVID stuff. And by the time we could get out of Victoria and I made it up to here, it was too late. The border was already closed. So I got to Goondiwindi and they said, turn around and go back. So I ended up at Mayoral.
What's it been like to stay in the Mayoral showgrounds since August?
Well, it wasn't part of the plan, of my plans, but there's a wonderful group of people here and it's a great support network for us. And I've made some good, valuable, lifelong friends. Darren and Leanne, the caretakers here, you couldn't wish for better.
When will you start heading up to the border?
Probably around about the 11th to 12th, because we're expecting a big long queue, obviously.
Queensland Police are already warning travellers to pack your patience. And you'll also have to have a negative COVID test 72 hours before arriving and get another test 5 days later. School finishes on Friday in Queensland's public schools, and the Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, says Monday's reopening will also allow earlier holiday travel. But waiting in their cars to collect children from this primary school north of Brisbane, some people tell AM they're not keen.
Well, I'm a little bit disappointed about it. Obviously, we're more vulnerable than most. We're in that age group.
These grandparents are worried about catching COVID.
Oh, we've just been so lucky. I think we're a bit spoilt, so not looking forward to it at all.
I know that when the borders open, I'll start to wear my mask more than I have been because, the risk of it spreading will be a lot greater for quite some time.
The Premier and Health Minister are telling Queenslanders they'll have to learn to live with COVID cases spreading in the community, and that checking into venues, social distancing and wearing masks in certain spots are more important than ever.
A little bit nervous, I think, about the border openings and, particularly people coming from hotspots, but I have to trust that it's going to be done in a safe way and following advice from people who know what they're talking about.
Sweeping new vaccine rules are coming in for almost everyone who works in New York City. Mayor Bill de Blasio has announced all private sector employers will be required to implement a vaccine mandate by the end of the month. Meanwhile, 17 US states have now identified the new Omicron variant, but Delta remains the dominant strain. As CNN's Jason Carroll reports, Dr. Anthony Fauci says there are encouraging signs Omicron may not be as severe as first feared.
New York City's mayor has made it official. Anyone working in the city will be subject to a vaccine mandate. The mayor announcing all private sector employees must be vaccinated by December 27th. Public city employees have been under a vaccine mandate since October.
We got to up the ante here. We've got to encourage people even more. Get that second dose because that's what gives you so much more protection.
And while some business organizations say they were caught off guard by the announcement, some medical experts support the new mandate.
But it is a smart public health move. I think we should set the right expectations about what the purpose of these vaccine mandates are.
In addition, beginning December 14th, children in New York City, ages 5 to 11, will be required to show proof of at least one shot before being allowed inside restaurants, gyms, or entertainment venues. Also today, new nationwide restrictions are in place for international airline passengers arriving to the United States. Those travelers must test negative for COVID within 24 hours of departure. No test means passengers will be banned from their flight. Until now, international travelers heading to the U.S. had 3 days before their flight to show a negative test. Meanwhile, the Omicron variant spreads quickly, although emerging evidence showing at this point it may not be as severe as the Delta variant, which continues to drive a surge in hospitalizations in the U.S.
We really got to be careful before we make any determinations that it is less severe or really doesn't cause any severe illness comparable to Delta. But thus far, the signals are a bit encouraging regarding the severity.
Nationwide, cases of coronavirus are rising. For the first time in 2 months, the U.S. this weekend averaged more than 100,000 new COVID-19 cases per day. But an encouraging development on the booster front. A new unpublished study has found using the J&J vaccine as a booster for people initially immunized with the Pfizer vaccine produced a strong immune response with patients. This comes as CDC data show the pace of vaccinations is rising, with an average of more than 2.2 million doses being administered daily.
It's encouraging. We still have tens of millions of people who've chosen not to vaccinate themselves or their children in this country.
A British teenager who survived a crocodile attack in Zambia in Africa says she's lucky to be alive. She was saved by her friend and is now recovering in hospital. The BBC's Louisa Pilbeam has more.
Amelie Osborne-Smith was on a gap year trip of a lifetime in Zambia. But in the waters near Victoria Falls, the 18-year-old was attacked by a crocodile.
When the accident happened, I fully accepted the fact that I was going to lose my foot. Okay. And I accepted that, and I said to all my friends, it's fine, I've lost my foot, I'm still alive. And then I was told that my foot's going to be fine and that I will be able to walk again. It's such a relief.
The accident happened on the Zambezi River while Amelie was whitewater rafting with a group. She was airlifted 240 miles to the capital Lusaka, where surgeons performed a life-saving operation and saved her leg. Amelie is expected back in the UK to be transferred to a hospital for more treatment.
Let's get to some of your feedback before we head off on checkpoints and traffic, actually. This person says, what about checkpoints to check people coming from Northland into Auckland? After all, where is the lowest vaccination rate? Another listener says, shouldn't the borders be keeping us Northlanders out of the rest of the country? We are the group who have not vaxxed, and those of us in Northland who are double vaxxed are paying a high price. Come on, Kaumatua and elders, please try and persuade those who have not been vaxxed. Jeff says, I think the iwi police checkpoints are a fine example of positive community action to protect the vaccinated and unvaccinated. Such community spirit is to be applauded when the aim is to keep people safe. And Chris from Tutakaka has got in touch. I'm a white middle-aged female. I'm fully vaccinated and I support Hone as the Northland Road and the Northland Roadblock 100%. The thought of unvaccinated people travelling to Northland over the break terrifies me. Mind you, I have heard of Aucklanders who have come north to our beautiful safe coast in their boats during lockdown. And this one, the checkpoints will be way in Northland, even though checkpoints should be at Te Hana. So a large number of people south of these checkpoints are bundled in with Aucklanders. Thus, our journeys north will encounter checkpoints possibly every day if working in Whangarei being stopped. That's a good point. And on parking, Francis has got in touch to say at Sandspit we have the most horrendous parking problem. Parking on the footpath requires residents to walk on the road, parking all over a grassed reserve, pushing into and over trees planted by locals. Call council? Useless. They never come. New council wants to provide parking on our other grassed reserve where camping ground children play. Ridiculous, says Francis. That's about all we've got time for. Now, the late news team will keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō, and tomorrow from 5, First Up speaks to Farah Palmer and Sir John Kerwin about mental health in sport. Now, this follows claims from Blackfern hooker Te Kura Ngata Arena Mate, who suffered a mental health breakdown during the team's end-of-year tour. Kia pai tōpō.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tai Topical Border Control says visitors heading to Northland without a vaccine pass or negative COVID-19 result may have to complete a rapid antigen test. A law expert says Thames-Coromandel voters will have the ultimate say on their mayor's vaccination stance, with the council legally unable to remove her. Māori health practitioners have told the Waitangi Tribunal that health ministry officials frequently ignored their advice. 7 hapu in Hawke's Bay are celebrating their Treaty of Waitangi settlement passing in Parliament. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
As a manager, you've got all the control, you've got all the power, you've got a lot of knowledge. So what do you see when you see these high performers coming at you? You see a threat to your job.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
We're not going to see those interest rates we saw in, say, the mid-80s or even the mid-2000s, where mortgage rates were up sort of 9, almost 10.
Lately with Karen Hay, every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Thanks, Karen. Between now and then, it's mostly nights of me, Brian Crump, on RNZ National. My guest after the news at 7, a largely libertarian thinker, Eric Crampton from the New Zealand Initiative. You probably recall in the news recently the Commerce Commission saying that there's a lack of competition in our grocery market. 2 players dominate. Maybe we need a third. Maybe we need a third so much that it should be subsidised to compete with the other 2. Is that really what we want? Another supermarket chain? Eric discusses after 7. Between now and then, hold on to your hats. It's time for another edition of Party People.
Nau mai te rā, haere rā te pō. Toia e tamanui te rā ngā māramatanga kia whitia, Ki runga I tā tātou kaupapa I ke ana ko Party People, haumie, huie, tai ki. Welcome to Party People, brought to you by the Public Interest Journalism Fund. I'm Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, and today is Tuesday the 7th of December, just 18 more sleeps until Christmas. And speaking of Christmas, I'm joined by two people who without a doubt are definitely on Santa's naughty list. Shane Te Pau and Tauhinari. Tēnā kōrua, kei te pia.
Well, all good. You know the problem?
No.
I've been on that list for 60 years, and the last year I was expecting to come off.
And no.
Well, what happened? Santa's in lockdown.
Is he though?
Of course, I was Santa once, and I think 83, 84, I got arrested, part of the anti-apartheid sort of movement at the time. So me and Santa have got some bad history. There you go.
Have you ever been Santa? At the kohanga,
I was Santa in Kaikohe one year when the last one, the week before, they threw water bombs and stuff at him. So I stepped in, and yeah, it was good. It was good fun. It was good fun. I got out of alive.
Yes. Someone this week suggested that Shane Te Pau was the new Māori Letterman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't go for the scruffy look.
No.
I like it.
Hey. It's just like dirty. Paru.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's talk about some kaupapa.
Sure.
Sorry, carry on, Mr.
No, I was
Letterman.
just going to say, I actually got a message from someone who said, I like the look, Daddy Bear. One of our followers. He said, there you go.
Yeah, I like the look.
Yeah, but your missus shouldn't do that.
It's coming off this Friday.
Up to 40 claimants will give evidence under urgency to the Waitangi Tribunal, dealing with the circumstances that many believe have been unfair and unjust, had an unfair and unjust impact on Māori. So the Māori Council, Māori leaders, health professionals and the National Health Coalition will participate in the hearings. Meanwhile, we heard this morning the High Court has instructed the Ministry of Health to review a decision not to share those details of unvaccinated Māori with whānau order. So let's just start there, Tau. This is the second time round it's been to court. Whānau order has taken the Ministry to account. The Ministry's been told it's got to meet the requirements. It's got to review its decision.